ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Stacy Herbert.
Thank you. It was actually in London. There were very many people out there concerned on Twitter that it had happened in Manchester. And they were like, good God, why did you get engaged in Manchester? I would have the ring to show you, but you know, we're too close to the City of London, where many assets and wealth get seized by Jamie Dimon and the London Whale. Of course, we've been warning you, everybody here, for 10 years, 9 years, since we started doing Resonance 104.4 FM here in London. So it was appropriate, really, that we got engaged here in London. So with that, oh, by the way, cash money for silver. You know, every time we go somewhere, this is why I love traveling with Max to all these events, is people come up and give me presents. Never do they give him presents. He does get a little upset. But somebody left this silver ounce, the silver necklace for me at the stand-up rage at the King's Head. And there was no note or message or anything. So I've been walking around with this silver, not knowing, and everywhere we go, I ask, who gave me the silver in the audience? And finally, cash money for silver, step forward. It's funny. It's funny, everywhere you go in the world now, you see, we buy silver, gold, and platinum. Nobody sells it. And they say it's supposed to be a bubble. Anyway, I know it's time now to introduce my fiance, Max Keiser.
Thank you. How's the sound? Can you hear me all right? Should I get up here? Oh, Lord. Yes, Stacy mentioned whenever we go, people give us gold and silver, and today's no exception. The only difference I've noticed is that the size of the ingots is getting bigger. It first started with a half ounce or a quarter ounce. This is a full kilo of silver bullion. Listen to this. That's the sound of Jamie Dimon's skull being crushed. Yes. Yes. We are actually winning against Jamie Dimon because, ladies and gentlemen, back when they took over Bear Stearns, they inherited a 3 billion ounce silver short position, a naked silver short position. They sold billions of ounces of silver that don't even exist. And over the course of the last couple of years, they've been trying to trade their way out of this position, but it has exposed their balance sheet to their trillions and trillions of dollars of derivatives, of their phony derivatives, their phony accounting. And as we know, last week they just announced a just disclosed $2 billion loss. Jamie Dimon didn't see it coming. Oh my God, it must be an oversight issue. It's an egregious mistake. No, it's a predictable mistake. There are going to be more of these mistakes. Their balance sheet is woefully vulnerable. Hedge funds around the world are now attacking Jamie Dimon and J.P. Morgan the way they attacked Greece, the way they attacked Ireland, the way they're attacking Spain. So the hedge funds are now attacking one of their own. It's a $140 billion company market capitalization. It will go the way of Enron. It will go the way of WorldCom. It will go the way of Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns. It's going to the big fat goose egg on that stock price of 0. And why is this important? It's important because these guys, these terrorists, these schmatas down there on Wall Street for the last 10 years, 15 years, 20 years have been effectively stealing our money. And they've been doing this in a variety of ways. Most interestingly, just this past few months, we discovered that J.P. Morgan actually raised the bar in their larceny, in their thieving, in the case of MF Global. Here was a $1.2 billion loss that suddenly appeared on the balance sheet. And what did JP Morgan do? They actually reached into customer accounts and took the money out from customers. That is larceny. That is highway robbery. These are the new robber barons. This is the new age of the robber baron, and we all are trying to do something about it. Now, when I say pull silver, physical silver off the market, for every dollar of physical silver you pull off the market, and let me just replay the sound of Dimon's skull being crushed. It has a nice finality to it. Every dollar of silver you pull out of the market by physically buying, by taking delivery of a kilo bar like this, you are encumbering $100 on JP Morgan's balance sheet. You are forcing them into receivership. You're forcing them down under the bathwater and drowning them under the piss of their own fraud. Now, we're very fortunate to be here during the Queen's Jubilee. It's very exciting. And, of course, everyone's gone branding crazy. Did we just pick this up in Manchester? There might be some available. Here's the Queen, portrayed as a lizard. The Lizard Queen. So these are available. And on the train to Manchester, I saw something on offer, and I'm surprised that they didn't decide to brand this for the Diamond Jubilee. This, of course, is Pussy Energy Drink. Pussy Energy Drink. Richard Branson is behind this. He's got some money involved. This is an actual beverage. And imagine if the Queen got behind this. Taste the Queen's delicious pussy energy drink. Nothing wakes you up in the morning better than a little bit of the Queen's pussy energy drink. Something to look for. I actually have a few cans of pussy energy drink, which I'll be giving away at the end of this presentation to some lucky folks who just can't get enough of the Queen's pussy energy drink. Now, let us focus more specifically. By the way, this is the Queen's Jubilee. I want to ask a question. Why shouldn't there be a Queen's Debt Jubilee? There should be a Queen's Debt Jubilee because all these debts that have been put in place by these banks, in Ireland, shamefully, Anglo-Irish Bank accumulated something like a, ungodly sum, €1 trillion or something like this in unsecured debits, and they're speculating in the markets, and they went bankrupt. And the government decides to back those deposits, and now is imposing austerity measures on the people of Ireland to basically bail out Anglo-Irish Bank, one bank. And here's a quote from none other than the Sean Fitzpatrick, who is the former CEO of Anglo-Irish, who says, quote, "The cause of our problem was global. So I can't say sorry with any kind of sincerity. I suggest you cut the sacred cows of Irish society, children, the elderly, and healthcare." After he made that statement, the government made good on a £1 billion unsecured debt. What about the word unsecured? Don't you understand? It's unsecured. The person who made that debt knew when they signed off on that debt that there was a probability that they wouldn't be getting paid back. So why is the government making good on an unsecured debt? It's unconscionable. It's unreasonable. It's antisocial. It's absurd. And, Iceland's faced with a similar situation of not being able to pay these debts, essentially declared a debt jubilee, and when asked, the president said, "Look, we don't have any money, but we'll be happy to pay you back in fish." So it got me thinking, the people of Ireland should make this Anglo-Irish debt good, paying back in butter. $1 billion or €1 billion full of butter. And of course, the UK can always pay back with the Queen's Pussy energy drink. Taste the monarchy. So this is, by the way, people who watch this show, our show, Stacy and myself do a show 3 times a week on RT. And occasionally we come up with stuff that catches the public imagination, especially here in the UK. We have our biggest audience in the UK. And we were on a few weeks ago, and we came up with something called STFU David Cameron. Does anyone remember that? Yeah. STFU David Cameron, which basically stands for Shut the Fuck Up, David Cameron. And the great thing about RT is that they play that stuff. They play that, and they play it over and over and over again. And of course, this country is not lost for the spokespeople of the neoliberal kleptocracy. Here's Jeremy Clarkson, who not a few weeks ago made the comment, "Execute public sector workers," said Jeremy Clarkson. The TV host suggested that public sector workers should be shot dead in front of their families. How dare they go on strike when they have gilt-edged pensions guaranteed while the rest of us have to work for a living? Jeremy Clarkson works for a public utility called the BBC. Right? Jeremy Clarkson has a contract with the BBC, which is, he's in fact a public worker. He exists at the largesse of you all who paid that licensing fee. And here he is making these comments. And of course, he picks on the pensioner. He picks on the person living on a fixed income. He picks on the savers in society. And recently, we've had a similar problem with the announcement from the Chancellor, George Osborne, who came out after he got pilloried for the pasty tax, which is something we've been championing for a while. We have great sympathy for the people of Cornwall. Anyone here from Cornwall? They're not selling enough pasties down in Cornwall. The people of Cornwall, you know, they had a campaign a couple of years ago. They were trying to get rid of the celebrity chefs and kick out the celebrity chefs. Then they wanted to protect the pasty under regional naming like a Parma cheese or a Parma ham. The Cornish pasty should have protection, you know, as something unique to Cornwall. And that wherever you go in the world, if you found a Cornish pasty, you would have to be associated with Cornwall. And this is the Cornish pasty. So finally, you know, the politicalization of the pasty reached up to the highest level of government, and George Osborne had to back down in the face of the pasty revolt. And concurrently, he makes these sweeping calls to what has been now in this country called the granny tax, imposing the granny tax. And this is a way to essentially attack the pensioners by lifting billions of euros, in this case, this latest iteration, 5 billion pounds of income that they would normally be getting, and they shifted over into the accounts of the speculators as part of this incredible diabolical relationship between savers and speculators, where the savers get screwed and the speculators are constantly able to make bets at 1,000 to 1, and whenever they make a mistake, they get bailed out, and the government turns around and imposes austerity measure. And it's the second and third and fourth time this happens. This government has transferred now 70 billion pounds from savers, from pensioners, people who worked for a living, unlike Jeremy frickin' Freeride Clarkson, and actually developed a pension from the sweat of their brow. Now they're having that money stolen to put in the pockets of speculators, and it's all under the oversight of this current government. And this is part of this global catastrophe that we are witnessing, where the central bankers are imposing this absurd policy of what they call quantitative easing. what a lot of people rightfully call financial repression. And this is where the central banks, by buying back the bonds that they just sold, they are buying back the gilts that they just sold, they buy them back in the open market, they are attempting to keep interest rates cheap, keep that 10-year rate cheap. They're buying back what they just sold, especially there's like dogs eating their own vomit. And they're doing this as a stated policy, and they keep interest rates down there close to 0%. I think the Bank of England just either cut or is about to cut from 0.5 point down to 1/4 point. That is an artificially cheap rate that does not help the economy whatsoever because it doesn't help in the creation of capital. People want capital is attracted to higher interest rates. Savings are attracted to higher interest rates. That's where capital goes. And you can't have capitalism without capital. And you can't have capital without savings. And you can't have savings without a reasonably high rate to attract savings. Their entire ideology, their entire economic outlook is flawed. And it's an ideology that comes from the collusion of the city and the Bank of England and this government to oppress you all and me financially. And it's erupting in places like Athens and Dublin and Cairo and Tunis in this global insurrection against this banker occupation. There is a global revolution afoot, and rightfully so, because we're being occupied by financial terrorists at the top, being enabled by this government and the U.S. government and the European government and the people who run Greece who are not even in the government. They're just technocrats that were parachuted in from Goldman Sachs. The same goes on in Italy. So you have this incredible panoply of corruption on the highest levels of government, colluding with banks. And they do it through interest rates. In the old days, during the wars of yesteryear, armies would storm in and tanks and soldiers, and they'd steal shit. And they'd plant a flag, and they'd put people in jail. Now they come in there with cheap or excessive or loans that had nothing to do with anyone incurring those loans. They say, you own those loans. Now we own the property. Now we own you. Oh, by the way, the biggest growing business in America is the prison business. The biggest growing population in America is the prison population. The greatest source of cheap labor in America now is prison labor. Hasn't been this way for just before the Civil War in America when prison slave labor was outlawed. Now it's back. It's being officially canonized by the legal system in the U.S. to allow for private prison corporations to use captured prison slave labor again. So they're working for 60 or 70 cents a day, and the excuse is, well, we're competing with China. You know, we can't compete with China unless we have these people making the same wages, you know, $2 or $3 a day. And by the way, you got to get rid of all the unions. You got to get rid of all of labor. You've got to totally decimate any organized thought, any organized resistance, any organized dissent. It all got to go because you got to compete with China. Meanwhile, in China, wages are going up because America, in its infinite wisdom, sent China $1 trillion vis-a-vis Walmart to buy shit that was made in China. And the U.S. consumer is so bamboozled by this. You know, they go down to Walmart and they buy a shovel to, you know, shovel their front lawn or something, and they pay, you know, a cheap price, everyday low price. They save 10 cents on that shovel because it's made in China. Meanwhile, they lost $1 in wages. So, but they don't do the math. They're unemployed now. Now wages are going up because all this money that the central banks have used to keep interest rates artificially cheap is popping up on the periphery. It's popping up on the periphery in out-of-control, chaotic ways. So you see price of food going up. You see the price of education going up. You see the price of healthcare going up. You see inflation, as it's called, represented in different ways. The portions of stuff at the supermarket get smaller, but at the same price. So that TV dinner now is half the size of what that Clark bar, that, you know, that, what do they call it here? The milk bar, the Cadbury milk, which, by the way, is, I believe, now owned by a U.S. corporation, is smaller. So that's another insidious form of inflation. The portions get smaller, the prices stay the same, or the prices are rising. So the economic integrity is degrading. In the U.S., the infrastructure is collapsing. Nothing to upgrade the infrastructure. You know, in this country, I was in Manchester. A great example of this was kind of robber baron profiteering is with the Manchester United with this Malcolm Glazer who comes in. He does a leverage buy to the club. He loads it full of debt. He takes himself a dividend of £1 billion or so, and now ticket prices are beyond what anyone can afford, so it destroys the entire fabric of society, of the community, for some fucking American dickhead who comes in there because he's not rich enough for some reason. $1 billion's not enough. He wants $5 billion. He wants $10 billion. It's absurd. You know, and how about in this country? We've got a similar situation a few years ago with Sir Philip Green over at Arcadia Group, which they own Topshop. They do a huge leverage buyout of Topshop with Arcadia, debt, put all the debt in place. He pays himself £1 billion dividend in his wife's name. She's in Monaco, so there's no taxes. So the company is on a razor's edge. You know, if retailing suddenly were to collapse, or Kate Moss, you know, gets hit by a bus, you know, the stock goes under, all his jobs are lost, but he doesn't care because his economics are already pulled out long ago in Monaco, where Philip Green goes to play with his hose. That's all anybody knows. So, austerity. Austerity. Not to worry, though. Here's something in the UK press. Short of cash for lunch? How about a toast sandwich? The austerity sandwich, which scientists have acclaimed as the cheapest lunch in Britain, consists of 2 slices of bread surrounding a filling of another slice of bread. And it costs just 7.5p. So great is the chemist's confidence that this is the cheapest sandwich that they are offering a 200-pound prize to the first person who can come up with a cheaper but edible alternative. How about a fucking fish sandwich? I'll give you a fish sandwich for free. And I feel really satisfied. I feel all good inside from giving you my fish sandwich. Yeah, the austerity sandwich contains 330 calories compared with 444 calories in the Marks & Spencer egg and watercress sandwich. And thus you're also accompanying that with a delicious can of the Queen's Pussy energy drink. Now, the psychopaths who run this godforsaken economic hellhole around the world, you know, we give you some interesting quotes here. You know, Larry Summers, he's one of the 3 people that Barack Obama inherited along with Ben Bernanke and Timothy Geithner. He's considered to be a smart guy. He was on Time Magazine. The 3 guys are the Committee to Save the World. All right, here's Larry Summers' quote. The central irony of financial crisis is that while it's caused by too much confidence, too much borrowing and lending, and too much spending, it can only be resolved with more confidence, more borrowing and lending, and more spending. Here's Paul Krugman. He's a New York Times economics columnist. You see him on TV every once in a while, you know, spewing propaganda as a front man for financial terrorists on Wall Street. Nice guy, though. He says, Alan Greenspan needs to create a housing bubble to replace the NASDAQ bubble. 2002. Here's Tony Blair. Tony Blair. Tony Blair. Tony Blair. It wasn't blood for oil. Let's be clear. It wasn't blood for oil. Tony Blair, quote, I could cash in a lot more than I do. Gives you a warm feeling, doesn't it? Tony Blair, welcome to my world. Here's Paul Krugman again. My proposal is that we have to get a bunch of scientists to tell us we're facing an alien invasion, and in order to be prepared for that invasion, we have to do things like build high-speed rails. And once we're recovered, we can say, look, there were no aliens. New York Times. And you wonder why so many people watch RT. Right? These fucking hacks like Paul Krugman are worth the dog shit on my shoe. Well, let me put it in those terms. I hope I'm not offending them. But seriously, is CNN another propaganda outlet, garbage, nonsense? All-time, 20-year ratings lows. Even Piers Morgan couldn't solve CNN, believe it or not. Some wanky, poshy, Marmite smearing, rent boy loving, It's like, hey, Piers Morgan, I can't hear you with Rupert Murdoch's cock in your mouth. Yeah. Uh-huh. Oh, that's a cleft chin. I thought that was jizz dribbling down. Here, Piers Morgan. Yeah, he's a ratings disaster. We do more ratings than they do. We get 10 times more ratings than those crackers. So, these guys are just, out of control. And, Greece, I think, we've been saying to folks that the front line in this global war, against the financial terrorism is Greece. Greece has become the front line. And, if you look at what's been going on in Greece, I just pulled a couple of interesting factoids out there. Leading up to the crisis, Greece had 13 off-market deals with Goldman Sachs to hide debt. Most were in 2001. This was a yen for euro swap to hide the national debt with a payback to incur in 2019, extended to 2037. So this is just a lot of accounting fraud that Goldman Sachs was involved with to make Greece eligible for the euro. Goldman Sachs was paid, billions. Greece has obviously been completely decimated. Here's a Citigroup trader faces inquiry over Greek debt rumors. So here's a Citigroup trader that was caught spreading false rumors about the Greek debt to incur, trading volatility that they can trade around, inside information, market manipulation. No inquiry, but nothing against him. The Greek prime minister, quote, rating agencies are running our lives. This is a reference to the fact that, Moody's and S&P, the rating agencies that gave AAA rating to resecuritize subprime mortgages that were resold into banks all over Europe, it then comes out and says, oh, well, Greece is only, we're going to downgrade Greece. It just so happens to coincide with some bets that Goldman Sachs make to profit from the demise of Greece. There's no collusion there. No, not at all. Even though it's been proven that there is collusion there, the collusion between the rating agencies, the hedge funds, the banks on Wall Street, the government, and mainstream media, they all work together, whether implicitly, or overtly, or just through. As one interesting story here, you talk about how does inside information get passed in this community of insider traders. And there's a story here from a trader at Credit Suisse who communicated his inside information to his fellow trader by using charades. So he went up to this guy, and this came out in the story where he'd say, we're about to launch a major bond offering. I bet you can't guess who it is. 2 words, start with the letter B. And they do this whole charades thing. And it's inside information. But, is that cute? Or is that a reason to stick his head in a guillotine? It's not cute. It's not cute because they're causing, people in Greece are blowing their brains out. Now, this guy, Slavoj Žižek, who, when he's ever on TV, I can't understand a word he says. But when he's writing, he makes some good points. He said, the Greeks are not passive victims. They are at war with the European economic establishment, and what they need is solidarity in their struggles because it's our struggle too. Greece is the main testing grounds for a new socioeconomic model of unlimited application, depoliticized technology in which bankers are allowed to demolish democracy. And that's true. We've been talking about this for years on our show, and this is the objective, this is the goal. They're being quite successful at it, and I think that Greece is the front line. I think that the Occupy Wall Street movement should send 10,000 people to Athens, and they should camp out in Athens. There should be global solidarity. In Greece, the food shortage in Greek prisons due to state budget cuts, it's causing supply shortages, and prisoners are about to starve to death. reports prison staff, since not even one grain of rice has been left in their warehouses. And, of course, where does this all come from? Who's at the center of this? Whose economy is actually growing in Europe? Who's got the only economy growing in the world? China is not. It seems to be on the rocks. The UK is not in great shape. The US is rolling over. Well, is there one economy in the world that seems to be doing fairly well compared to all the others? Oh, it's Germany, right. So Germany's economy is actually growing. The employment rate's growing. Their social welfare programs are in surplus. And here they are, at the tail end, the other end of this Greek prison situation where the prisoners are starving to death and rotting to death from the motherland. Now, haven't we seen this script before? I mean, isn't this kind of like, what's your solution to the debt problem, Germany? Oh, we have a final solution. We have a solution, all right. Here's another German solution. They have proposed, as part of this ongoing crisis, they are now going to try to round up all these European economies under some kind of fiscal treaty that they're going to manage out of Berlin, and they're going to issue these new bonds, which are going to be somewhat close to the Maastricht Treaty limit, blah, blah, blah. And to be a part of this thing, guess what you have to give them as collateral? Gold. Now, we've been saying this for a couple of years now, that the end game is a mad dash to gold. The U.S. has about 8,000 tons of gold, purportedly, in Fort Knox. Europe has roughly 10,000 tons of gold. Russia has, Germany has 3,000 tons, but 60% of that is actually held in vaults outside of Germany, New York, and around the world, so it's a bit of a problem there. China's got 1,000 tons. They've got an open order to buy 5,000 tons. If you ever want to front run you want to be a front runner yourself and front runner trade, if you're buying gold, you're buying it ahead of China that has $3 trillion, and they're looking to buy 5,000 tons. So that's one very compelling reason to park some cash into gold, because you're going to have China be your, the China put, as I would call it. Anytime the price drops, China is on the bid. Gimme, gimme, gimme. They're buyer, buyer, buyer. They're the buyers. So Germany basically is making this massive play for gold, and because when the currencies ultimately collapse, as they are doing, there will be another Bretton Woods type sit down, and all the currencies will be recalibrated and reestablished and reassigned and revalued against something, and that something will be, as it always has been and always will be, gold. Can't get away from it. Hold its purchasing power for 5,000 years. So this is where this is all going. Central banks are net buyers of gold now for the first time in 30 years. High net worth individuals now are buyers of gold. There's some talk, corporate balance sheets and corporations are looking to diversify their huge cash position into gold. Pension funds are talking about now owning some gold. So this is all very interesting, moving into gold, because people understand that the currency markets, the derivative markets, there's $700 trillion in derivatives in an economy, a global economy of only 65, or call it 60 trillion. There's more than 10 times the amount of derivatives in the world in the entire global GDP. J.P. Morgan, this one bank in New York, has 90 trillion in derivatives. The entire, the GDP of America is only 15 trillion. And all that paper is held together with sticking tape and rubber bands and spit and algorithms and quantitative analysis and theoretical mathematical formulas that don't add up to a hill of beans. It's all nonsensical. It's a value at risk accounting is what they call it. If this is worth 100 cents on the dollar if a butterfly in Peking flaps its wings at 30 knots an hour while the queen is waving to the crowds on the Thames while drinking a delicious beverage called pussy. That's the valuation model, and it's breaking, it's cracking. There's no collateral. Ultimately, there's no collateral. They can't just keep refloating, resecuritizing, remortgaging, and reselling the same shit over and over again, because there's an end point. You hit a point of saturation, which was hit in 2007. It started to collapse. Then they injected a lot of more crappy money and debt and nonsense, and you had a bit of a bump, a sugar high, a rally, woohoo! Now we're back to the primary trend that started in 2007 of this deleveraging, unwinding, debt collapse that is taking all these currencies down with it. The dollar is holding up relatively compared to other currencies, but it has the advantage. Here's some dollars here. It has the advantage of being the world reserve currency. Going back to Bretton Woods of the 40s, this is what they came out with. They said all the world's currencies trade against the dollar. And by the way, the dollar is backed by gold. And this held for up until 1971, because Nixon was trying to get caught, in the quagmire of Vietnam, he went off the gold standard basically to pay for Vietnam and a war that American, in America, I'll say something that you're not allowed to say in America. America lost that war. But it's not something you hear often in the United States. But in losing that war, we went off the gold standard. And as this was 1971, it was really the beginning of this Ponzi scheme, this pyramid scheme, this growth of the derivative market. And also listed equity options started trading in late 70s, early 80s in Chicago, based on the option volatility formula, Black-Scholes, Nobel Award-winning formula that you can price risk. According to this formula, I can buy an option that's $50 out of the money on a company that has no earnings. And I can speculate with that, and I can trade them, and I've got all this volume, and I've got all these commissions, and I'm making a lot of money, and I'm trading. That's what I did on Wall Street. I was an options trader. That was, I was the third or fourth biggest options trader in the entire Shearson Lehman Hutton system. At one point in 1989, made over $1 million in commissions, a year, just trading nothing but options. And I can tell you that not one of my customers at the end of the year ever showed a profit. And, occasionally one did. And we refer to those customers as gifted customers. But typically at the end of the year, when you have a book of dead clients, people that you've destroyed by churning them unmercifully in the options market, whether it's Greece, whether it's Ireland, whether it's the pension account, whether it's AIG, Lehman Brothers, MF Global, everything always turns out that there's some schmuck on Wall Street churning some account to death. It's always the same thing. And this is what I did when I was there also. And at the end of the year, you have a book of clients, and most of them are dead. They're suing you, some of them. But of course, as they tell you on Wall Street when you work there, don't worry, we got lawyers. If you don't have at least one lawsuit against you, you're not showing enough initiative. So you have this book of dead clients, and they're dead, they're toast. You destroy them. But what you do is you go downstairs, you go across the street. I was working at Payne Weber at the time. You just go across the street to Merrill Lynch, and you meet your buddy at Merrill Lynch, and he's got a similar situation. He's got a book of dead clients. So you do a dead book swap. I'll take your dead clients, you take my dead clients. Then you go back upstairs, okay, go to the New Year's Eve party, drink a lot of cocktails, hang out in Malcolm Forbes' boat, talk some big shit. New Year rolls around, back in the office, call this guy's dead book. Hey, Mr. Jones, how you doing? Don't call me, I hate Wall Street, I lost all my money. Oh, Mr. Jones, you didn't own Alpha Specto Dulup, did you? Yeah, how'd you know? Oh, that was a classic error from last. Oh, it's terrible. My clients got out of that. So you start spinning this tale, and of course you know his name, his wife's name, his social security number, his banking information, every trade he's done in the last 3 years. You know his entire life. You have it there right in front of you. So naturally, as a salesman, it's very easy to walk him back into the game. Get back on the horse, Mr. Jones. You can make that money back before your wife finds out. So, yeah, okay, man, buy me 1,000 shares. Yes, we're back. And at the end of the year, he's back in the dead book. Yeah. It's back to Merrill Lynch. Yeah, oh, that guy again. Oh, shit. And it goes on and repeats itself. But that basic form of larceny is just played out on a bigger institutional level. So when you hear about, George Osborne in the dispatch box whinging on about some terrible economic situation, if you did the accounting, you'd find out that somewhere along the line somebody called him from the city or this Wall Street and got him to buy some load of crap that he can't pay out of. And now he's like, how do I get out of this? So it's like, well, David Cameron, you got to bring in reform. You got to change the banking system. You've got to help people escape this tyranny, this occupation. No. If I bring in reform, we're going to lose all that business. I can't bring in reform, because he's basically got a gun to his head. He's being held hostage. He's got Stockholm syndrome. He's fallen in love with his captors. The government, this government, and other governments, they need to escape the tyranny of being held hostage by financial terrorists. You can't negotiate with terrorists. Speaking of terrorists, okay, for those of you who listen to me now and say, Max, he's got a beautiful fiance, but he sounds a bit unhinged. He's a bit mad, isn't he? All that rubbish about banker terrorism. Well, listen to this. Dental abuse seen driven by private equity investments. Now, private equity, by the way, is where Mitt Romney comes. He's running for president of the United States, right? Here's the story. Isaac's dentist was dispatched to his school by Reach Out Healthcare America, a dental management services company that's in the portfolio of Morgan Stanley Private Equity, operates in 22 states and deals with 1.5 million patients. Isaac Gainon stepped off the school bus sobbing last October. His mother saw steel crowns on his teeth. A dentist statement in his backpack said he had received 2 root canals, the crowns, and 10 x-rays at school without parental notification. That's private equity. That's Wall Street. That's a financial holocaust. These people are no better than the people of the last Holocaust. The fact that they're not being brought up in front of a financial war tribunal for financial Holocaust crimes against humanity is a shame. It is our shame. Yeah. But there is good news. I bring good news. Death penalty for bankers. Wu Ying, once one of the richest women in China, was sentenced to death for swindling $57 million from investors. Yes! China is ahead of the curve. In America, they have, I'm not saying I'm for the death penalty. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that it does represent a certain deterrent. And in the United States, they already have the death penalty. They execute lots of people every year. And what I'm saying is, instead of executing some poor black kid in Texas because you're a racist pig, why not a white cracker on Wall Street because he's a Holocaust-provoking fuckhead, right? What about that? What about? I believe I was trying to say fuck wad. J.P. Morgan. The crimes these bankers commit are, J.P. Morgan bets against J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan is speculating on its own demise. It doesn't even believe itself it's going to survive. It's making these huge bets against its own survival. Why should we be bailing out these banks if they themselves are speculating on their own death? How J.P. Morgan prints money. The bank earns interest on funds it borrows. It earns interest on funds it borrows. J.P. Morgan's negative borrowing cost highlights the absurdity of current monetary policy. There's no doubt that setting interest rates at less than 0 for J.P. Morgan has enabled banks to recapitalize at the cost of fundamental distortions in risk trading. The more they borrow, the more they get paid. They borrow at 0%, and they are one fraction of 1%, and they get paid 2% interest to borrow at that money. Now, would you all like that deal? How much do you get charged on your mortgage? How much do you get charged on your credit card? If you skip a Chase Manhattan card payment 1 month and they jack the rate up from 16 to 32%, J.P. Morgan, their rate of borrowing is negative. It's negative. It's less than zero. When a bank earns interest on funds it borrows, that must surely be the pinnacle of the evolution in an industry that traces its modern origins back over 600 years. This is the worst financial holocaust we've seen in 600 years. Oh, and what happened 600 years ago was the Black Plague, basically, give or take. And, the Black Plague, of course, without which there would be no middle class at all, because half of Europe got wiped out and the remaining people left. There was a bit of a bidding war for those people to work on the Lord's manor. This was the beginning of what we call the middle class. But the Lords, they want to go back to the way it was. They want negative interest rates. They want indentured servitude. They want feudalism. And they're not going to be happy until they get there. And these guys are unopposed. There's no laws opposing them. There's nobody stopping them. They got rid of Glass-Steagall in the U.S., separating the speculative bank from the commercial bank. They introduced the Millennium, what is it called? Anyway, it's an act, the Commodity Future Modernization Act, which essentially reclassified all derivative trading, which had then previously been classified as gambling. It was no longer considered gambling. It was considered now when Hank Paulson can go in front of Congress and say, we need $750 billion right now. And then the Congress can say, wait a minute, we need to sleep on it. And then he pushes a button, he crashes the market, using the fact that there is no barrier between him and using markets as a weapon of mass financial destruction, as Warren Buffett called it. Then the next day they pass that law. They say, here's the money. That $750 billion, which was also part of, now we know, from a Bloomberg Freedom of Information Act, under the table, they actually got $16 trillion, which went to banks overseas, Europe, here, elsewhere, as part of trying to make good on these derivative contracts that are falling apart. The liquidity is drying up. It's not a liquidity crisis. It's an insolvency crisis. But if you listen to Jeremy Paxman on BBC, he'll say with some guy like Paul Krugman or some banker like the guy from Barclays, they'll say, well, it's an insolvency crisis. We need more liquidity. We need more money. We need more credit. We need less collateral. We need less regulation. Otherwise, the situation is going to get worse and the economy is going to crash. It's not a liquidity crisis. It's an insolvency crisis. Barclays Bank is bankrupt. HSBC is bankrupt. HBOS is bankrupt. These banks are bankrupt. They have a negative equity. They have a book value of negative hundreds of billions of pounds. There's nothing there. They're kept aloft with a mass holographic psychosis, which seems to recognize a balance sheet filled with loans upon loans upon loans upon loans as having a value other than negative zero. And it's crashing in real time. It's falling apart right now. And I have been buying gold and silver. This is a way to protect your wealth, your purchasing power. I'm not here to be a salesman for these two, but I'm just saying that it has worked out over the past 10 years, and I think it'll continue to work out. Only keep money in paper that you're willing to lose is basically what I want to leave you with on that front. Now, we've got about a couple minutes left. I think I'm having maybe 5 or 6 minutes left. And I want to do some Q&A. But before I do that, I'll just bring up one more point, which I think is interesting, is that money laundering threatens the Vatican. So the 2012 International Narcotics Control Strategy report places the Vatican among 68 countries defined as jurisdictions of concern. The Vatican Bank, known as the IOR, formerly known as the Institute for Works of Religion, was entangled in the fraudulent collapse of this big bank. Of course, in the 1980s, was part of that Roberto Calvi scandal when he was found hanging from London's Blackfriars Bridge. And, also when I was up in Dublin, up in Ireland, my message to the Irish people is that you were very good in getting rid of the priests. They closed their embassy at the Vatican as a result of the Murphy report that detailed pedophile crimes in the church against their kids. And they closed their embassy in the Vatican. And they need to understand that they've got, Sean Patrick is essentially a financial pedophile and rapist who's fucking their economy unmercifully. and destroying their kids, and they need to shut him down. You know, if you can take on the Vatican, you know, you shouldn't be afraid of Anglo-Irish. You know, he's only been around for a couple of decades. If you're willing to say to the Pope, get lost, you ponce, surely you can deal with Sean Fitzpatrick, Ireland. And, but this plague of financial fraud is spreading. It's already here, as you know, in various shapes and forms. And the time to act is now. Thank you very much. We'll do 3 questions, and each question will get a can of the Queen's Pussy energy drink. We'll do 3 questions. Is that okay, Ian? Okay. So, gentlemen in the first row, you are the first recipient of a can of pussy.
My question is, if you do a search on the internet for the production cost of gold, the average cost is about $247, with some mines where there are such rich seeds, it's only costing them $47 to extract an ounce. How can the world price of gold be $1,500, $1,600?
Right. So in the mining sector, you have large mines around the world. You got Goldcorp, American Barrick, other miners. Their average cost is not exactly as you state, but it is less than $1,000 an ounce. And clearly the price is $1,500 or $1,600 an ounce. And so there is that spread. But markets are a discounting mechanism. Markets look forward, and markets know that the cost of extracting gold going forward is going to continue to go high as the infrastructure collapses. And also, they look at the fact that a lot of these seams, like in South Africa, are tapped out. The gold in South Africa is running out. There's a shortage of gold developing. Peak gold is what some may call it. In silver, definitely you've hit peak silver. The silver market is becoming extraordinarily tight. There's only 1 billion ounces above the ground. 700 million goes into solar and other industrial uses. The rest goes into investment purposes. You know, there are some miners, but there's a huge demand. But that should not be for you. I would turn it the other way around and say, you know what, that's an opportunity. These miners are being traded down in a way that's not reflective of the dynamics of the cost versus the reality of this marketplace. The miners are cheap, in my opinion. I don't want to talk about gold mining shares per se, because it's you talk to Rastani and these other guys who are more market-driven players. They'll give you better ideas about it. But in my opinion, the miners are dirt cheap. Silver miners are dirt cheap. And the price discrepancy you just mentioned is a reason to look at them as, is this where that hot money is going to go when it leaves Facebook? Well, as it's leaving right now rapidly, and this whole social networking bubble is now past. Next question. Who will be the winner?
Hang on, can you just wait?
The second.
I'll let Max choose who gets the pussy.
Oh, thank you. Right here, right. Yes, there you go, sir.
Thank you. What's going to stop the governments from making owning gold illegal?
Right. So gold confiscation, we had it already in the 30s in the U.S. I think that over the course of the last couple of years, it's become incredibly diversified all over the world. A lot of ways to own gold. A lot of people, so it's going to be very difficult to come in. I think more, aside from confiscation, the bigger threat is going to be tax. So they'll say, oh, gold will be taxed at 90% or 95%. So that's a possibility. But I still, even under that scenario, you're talking about versus what? Paper controlled by Visa, which is in MasterCard, and it's all electronic, and it's all, like they can go into your accounts and take that money. So these are concerns. They're legitimate concerns, and we have to weigh them up in terms of the pros and cons. But after weighing them all up, I still would prefer to own a physical gold and silver, which maintain purchasing power, that gives me some autonomy, some independence, versus a system that's increasingly becoming controlled by folks that don't think twice about just taking your money. But that's a legitimate concern, absolutely. Oh, my friend in the first row.
Hang on.
Oh, I'm split. Oh, we'll do one. I spoke to you earlier anyway. We'll talk to you later. I'm sorry, I'm a sucker for pretty face.
Actually, he can have the pussy, and I'll just have the microphone.
Good point.
No, I do want the question. There is a question.
Okay.
Okay, so the question is... Sorry, it's too close.
I'm sorry.
My question is, like, we can see everything's happening now. So
Volume, Laura, volume.
So my question is, what is the timeline, do you think, of things happening, like if Greece comes out of the euro and everything imploding? What's the time frame? Because let's go back to Restini. You know, he said in that interview last September, in the next 12 months, so we've got 4 months to September. So what's your thoughts?
Yeah, no. I think Rossini's onto something. You know, I think the timeline is now because the banks are, just last Friday, the SEC imposed some new collars, trading restrictions on the stock market, which we hadn't seen after the big blowout of 2008, which would imply they're looking for a 10 to 20% crash on the regulatory front. So and the banks, you know, we're having runs on banks all over the world. I mean, that's you know, Northern Rock had a run here. That was the beginning of runs on banks all over the world. That hasn't gone away. It's only become more widespread. People are panicking, and when they go to the bank and they're panicking, clearly that's not the time to try to figure out what to do. I mean, the trends are in place. People are panicking. The governments are completely irresponsible. They're completely in the pockets of the bankers. They've stripped away all regulations and all stop signs in front of them from wholesale thievery. You know, all of these signals, to me, you know, warrant close attention and for action to be taken. And I think the timeline is now. I really do. I don't think this is going to be, the can will be kicked down the road. You know, what'll be the trigger? Ultimately, it'll be something, you know, nobody's looking at, but it'll instill fear suddenly. You know, maybe Greece will just come out and say something that just strikes people incredibly in a frightful way. And those hedge funds out there that are leveraged 50 to 1, or those banks that are leveraged 50 to 1, they just go, to hell with it, I'm getting out of here. They hit the panic button. And now the market's down huge. And all the computers kicking, algorithmic computers tricking. 86% of all the trades in the New York Stock Exchange are computers trading with computers. They're not even people. So you don't have any possibility of a rational decision being made. It's just a computer programmed to look at a price and sell. You know, I was a stockbroker during 1987 with the crash on Wall Street, and this was really an example of computers in Chicago and computers in New York feeding on each other in a death spiral, where no human being stepped in, could stop it. They were just referencing each other, and you had this crash. This has now only gotten a lot more leveraged and a lot more dangerous, and you have these flash crashes that they're called. That's incredibly unacceptable. There should be no flash crashes, and yet the response from the regulators and from the government is that it's totally under control. You know, we have it won't happen again. That's not true. It's going to happen again because you're only making the system more complicated by adding more layers of debt. So any system, and we're talking about a global financial system, the level of complexity expands exponentially as you add each incremental unit of debt. So it's not a linear progression. To go from 50 trillion to 60 trillion in debt around the world doesn't increase the complication and risk of collapse in a linear fashion. It expands exponentially. And therefore, the collapse is guaranteed. It's baked into the cake. There is absolutely no question that we'll have another 2008 event, but much worse. Just like 2008 was worse than long-term capital management. That was worse than 1987. That was worse than all these preceding crashes. Their response to each crash is to increase the debt and to increase the complication of these markets by implementing and imposing more mathematical formulas that control risk based on a formula that's inherently flawed. And this has just kept going on, to the point where it's now collapsing. It's collapsing. Like Hemingway said, I believe in one of his famous novels, he went broke slowly at first and then all at once. Right? So this is what we're talking about. I say be prepared. And you know, as far as crash JP Morgan buys silver, they're going to zero. Silver's going to, you know, $500 an ounce. We'll have the money. They'll be sitting on losses. I'd rather have the money than Jamie Dimon. I want the money. I'm in it for my self-interest. I'm not actually politically motivated. I'm not morally motivated. I'm not ethically motivated. I'm survivally motivated. I want the money. And I know gold and silver is money. It's been money for 5,000 years. I know they're going to go out of business. And I know gold and silver is going to be a lot higher. And I want money. I don't want to be in a goddamn prison, a debt prison. You know, I don't want to be in debt prison. That's my personal feeling. I don't know about y'all. Yes, what are we doing on time? We're out of time? All right, we're out of time. Okay, well, thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Max Keiser.
All right.